This is the ultimate question. What phone should I buy today? Not everyone has $1,000 to spend on a phone, but at $250, this is a pretty nice choice. This phone is known for the camera and stock software, but does it make it worth it? Let's talk about it first, because there's a lot more to this phone. Should you buy the Google Pixel 3 in 2020? Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review. Check out the social media listed above in the description for some extras. Alright, let's review this compact phone. Even at 1080p, this is a really nice screen. It's a 5.5-inch flat, flexible OLED panel with a screen resolution of 1080 by 2160, making 443 pixels per inch at that 18:9 screen ratio. Thankfully, it doesn't have a notch or any other screen intrusions other than the warranted forehead and chin. This LG-made panel looks pretty good, maxing out at about 450 nits, and has very little color shifting, if any really. One thing I did notice is that there is a little bit of image retention, but it goes away after a few seconds. It's not a big deal, it's just kind of weird. For me, the screen is small, but it isn't bad for those looking for a phone this size. Just like the Pixel 3 XL, you get the always-on display and double tap to wake features. I love this type of always-on display because it shows all the stuff that you need, and even shows you what song's playing. The screen could be a little bit better, especially given the normal $800 price tag, but at $250, it's not really that bad, given the size. We could use a 1440p screen, but even for me, this 1080p panel works perfectly. Again, I'm just glad that Google didn't add a notch for this version. These cameras are still one of the best sensors that I've ever seen, just with the lack of some functionality, whether we're talking about the use of multiple cameras or video recording. First, we start with a single rear camera, which is a 12.2 megapixel sensor with optical image stabilization. And let me say, there is a lot about this camera, so I'll leave some information on the camera features and stuff that happens in the background, but ultimately this means that there's at least 5 things going on in the background when you take a shot, and then you get something like this. You will always get amazing shots out of this sensor, whether we're talking about taking day or night shots. This is never surprising for a Pixel device thanks to the Pixel Visual Core for image processing. And the portrait shots are especially nice, with the edge detection beating the iPhone 11 Pro Max, at least in my opinion. This phone has night shots which come out looking pretty nice, and the astrophotography shots look outstanding as well. As for video recording, this phone is lacking, at least in my eyes. The phone should capture 4K at 60 frames per second, but it doesn't. Okay, that's fine I guess, but it also doesn't capture 1080p at 60 frames per second. When you set the camera to auto, it does capture 60 frames per second, but only at certain times. There's no option for fixed 60 frames per second video in any format. Awesome camera, but not that good for video. As for the front cameras, we get 2. There are dual 8 megapixel sensors, one being a 97-degree wide-angle sensor and the other being a standard angle sensor. To me, these are some of the best camera sensors I've seen on any Pixel, let alone any phone. The wide angle is cool, for group shots at least, but that's not the reason why I care about this camera. Instead, it's the focusable standard angle that takes the cake for me. This produces some of the nicest portrait shots that I've ever seen on a phone, and did I mention it focuses? Still, to this day, this is the best front camera, at least in my eyes. I still think it's crazy that at this time, Google gave us more cameras on the front of the phone compared to the back. And to this day, we see that Google doesn't want to give us more than 3 sensors for whatever reason. Now the hardware section is a little bit disappointing on paper, but it just works. This phone is powered by a 2915 mAh battery, which sounds small but lasts through the day with little issues. This is a semi-bright 1080p OLED after all. It seems like a max of 5 hours of screen on time is what you'll get on this phone. I doubt you'll get 2 days out of this battery without using power saving mode. Here's a Geekbench battery test, which it could be better. The other thing powering this phone is a Snapdragon 845 chip along with 4GB of RAM, with the latter being a little bit disappointing on paper. In real usage, Google has increased the RAM management to the point where I didn't really experience any issues. But that doesn't mean that you won't experience any issues like apps closing to save RAM. Regardless, after all of these software updates, the phone still performs well, as a normal 2-year-old flagship should. Speaking of software, this phone runs the latest Android, which currently is Android 10, and it probably will run the latest Android for a couple of years, seeing that Google stopped supporting the Google Pixel, but it still supports the Pixel 2 series. As for the phone itself, it's a pretty standard design. You have glass on the front, a shiny aluminum frame in the middle, and glass on the back as well, with that cool little half matte, half glossy back. Yes, these are etches in the back, and they can be removed, but it takes a lot of work to do so. Also, there is a camera bump for whatever reason, but the fingerprint scanner is in a familiar and useful location. Going back to the front, we get some front-facing speakers, which could be better, but Google has definitely fixed most of the issues that plagued the Pixel 3 series during release. As for the metal frame, it is a shiny aluminum, which is normal, but it also has the squeeze sensor, which Google calls the Active Edge. Gimmicky to me, given the use case for it, which is to activate the Google Assistant. There are numerous ways to activate Google, but it's still a cool feature that I never really used. Speaking of, there is no headset jack, as expected, and Google relies on you buying an adapter for that headset jack. But in 2020, you can just add Bluetooth to a lot of things you need, and it's going to be pretty cheap. Not to mention that this phone comes with the adapter in the box. Also, that bottom port is USB-C 3.1, which means faster data transfers if you have the right cable and device. It also gives you 18-watt fast charging, which works well with this small battery. And since the back is glass, you get wireless charging as well as water resistance. The former is slow 5-watt wireless charging unless you buy the expensive Pixel stand, but I'm not sure how many people will actually pay $70 or more to get the only 10-watt wireless charger that will work for this phone, while the cable will do almost double that speed. Remember how I said it doesn't shoot constant 60 frames per second video? Well, that might be because the phone only comes in 64 and 128GB sizes with no option for expanding. That's actually a decent amount of storage, so they probably limit the 60 frames per second video because they give you unlimited storage for pictures and videos until January 2022. 60 frames per second video does take up a lot of space after all. I love how light this phone is at 148 grams, which makes it one of the lightest flagship phones that you can buy. Lastly, it is kind of interesting that this phone supports a physical SIM card as well as an eSIM, just not both. So this is not a dual SIM phone, even though Google could have made it a dual SIM phone if they really wanted to. Instead, they gave that feature to the cheaper Google Pixel 3a. Strange. So should you buy this phone in 2020? At a reasonable price, I would say go for it. For compact flagship phones, there seems to be a decent demand, but a low supply. As for that, and also having amazing cameras, an even smaller supply. There are some downsides to this phone, one being the recording options, but the average person is going to love this phone. At least, that's what I've experienced. For the price, there may be some other options out there that may seem like better deals, but I'll still stand by my original statement. If you want to buy the Pixel 3a, don't. Buy the Pixel 3. And that's all I wanted to talk about. Thanks for watching my review of the Google Pixel 3, the flagship that should be the best, but isn't. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section or message me on Twitter. I get bored over there. Also, check out the other social media listed above. Subscribe and hit that bell button if you like the channel and want to see more videos. Thanks for watching.